I was devastated when I found out that my ex-boyfriend of 5 years had started dating my sister. It was a total shock, and I couldn't believe that he would do something like that. I had always trusted him, and now it felt like he had betrayed me in the worst way possible. At first, I just tried to ignore it and pretend that everything was okay. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, and I hoped that he would come to his senses eventually and realise that it was wrong to date his ex-girlfriend's sister. But as time went on, it became harder and harder to keep my feelings bottled up. One day, he sent me a message with a picture of him and my sister on a romantic vacation. He actually wrote, "Wish you were here," and it made me feel sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe that he was rubbing his new relationship in my face like that. As the weeks went on, things got even worse. He started sending me more and more pictures and messages, trying to make me jealous. He would talk about how happy he was with my sister and how great their relationship was. It was like he was trying to prove something to me. One day he sent me a message that changed everything. He wrote, "I still have feelings for you, you know, and if you want to get back together, all you have to do is sleep with me." I was shocked and disgusted. How could he even suggest something like that? It was bad enough that he was dating my sister, but now he was trying to blackmail me into sleeping with him? I couldn't believe it. I begged him not to do this. I told him that he was hurting both me and my sister, and that he needed to stop playing games, but he wouldn't listen. He just kept sending me messages and pictures, trying to continue to make me jealous and upset. Finally, I decided that I had had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. I told my sister what was going on, hoping that she would understand and break up with him. But she didn't. She accused me of trying to break them up, and refused to believe that he could be capable of such a thing. I felt so alone and isolated. My ex-boyfriend was still sending me messages and pictures, trying to get me to sleep with him. I tried to show my sister, but she just ignored me. She was angry at me and refused to acknowledge that anything was wrong. I didn't know what to do. In the end, I decided that the best thing for me was to cut ties with both of them. I blocked my ex-boyfriend's number and deleted him from all my social media accounts. I even stopped talking to my sister altogether. It was painful and hard, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Years have gone by since then, but the memories still haunt me. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd given in to his demands. Would things have turned out differently? Would I be with him now, instead of living with the regret and pain of what happened? I mean, I lost a sister that day. We still haven't spoken. But then I remember that I did make the right choice. I stood up for myself and refused to be blackmailed. And at least that's something that I can be proud of. It seemed my ex-girlfriend was determined to haunt me. It had been months since we'd last seen each other, but one day, out of nowhere, I started receiving Facebook friend requests from several different accounts, all with the same name and profile picture of my ex-girlfriend. At first, I was confused, but I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just a prank by one of my friends, so I ignored the requests and went about my day. But these requests just kept coming, day after day, until I couldn't ignore them any longer. I decided to confront my ex-girlfriend about it, so I messaged her and asked if she was behind the requests. She denied it, of course, but I knew that she was lying. The requests continued, and I started to feel like I was being watched. I could see her in the corner of my eye, even when I knew she wasn't there. I felt like I was losing my mind. One night I was sitting at home and I heard a knock on the door. I opened it to find my ex-girlfriend standing there, tears streaming down her face. "Please, can't we just be together? I just want to be with you again." I was shocked and scared, but I tried to remain calm. I explained to her that it wasn't healthy to obsess over someone like that, and that she needed to move on with her life. But she wouldn't listen. She kept begging and pleading, and I started to feel like I was in danger. I tried to push her away, but she was too strong. She grabbed onto me, and I couldn't break free. Eventually, after a struggle, I managed to get her off me, and I told her that she needed to leave. She refused at first, but eventually she gave in and left. After that night, I started to receive even more friend requests from fake accounts, all with the same name and profile picture of my ex-girlfriend. It was clear that she wasn't going to give up, and I knew that I had to take action to protect myself. I blocked her on all social media and changed my phone number. It was a drastic step, but I knew that it was the only way to keep her out of my life for good. To be fair, it's been years since that night, and I've never seen or heard from my ex again. But the memory of her obsession always lingers within the back of my mind, and it's a reminder of the dangers of holding on to a love that isn't healthy or real. A few months ago, I had broken up with my ex-boyfriend, Alex. We ended things amicably enough, but I was still a bit surprised when he called me out of the blue one day and said he had a surprise for me. I was sceptical at first, but also quite curious. He had always been a romantic at heart, and I wondered what he had up his sleeve. He didn't tell me much, but he did say that he had booked us a trip somewhere. He said it was a place I had always wanted to go, and that it would be an adventure. I was intrigued, but also wary. I didn't want to get my hopes up. A few days later, he showed up at my door with a bouquet of flowers and a grin on his face. He handed me a plane ticket and a brochure for a resort in Bali. I was stunned. Bali had always been on my bucket list, but it was incredibly expensive. How could he afford this? He told me not to worry about the cost, that he had been saving up for this for months. He said he wanted to take me on a trip of a lifetime, to make up for any mistakes he had made during our relationship. I was touched, but also a bit suspicious. Why was he doing all of this now, after we had broken up? I did agree to go on the trip, but I was constantly on guard. I didn't want to get my hopes up, and I didn't want to fall for any of his tricks. We made our way to the airport, and I just tried to relax and enjoy the moment. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When we arrived at the airport, I noticed a group of men staring at me. They were dressed in dark suits and seemed to be talking amongst themselves. I tried to ignore them, but they made me feel uneasy. Alex noticed my discomfort and tried to distract me, so I could tell he was nervous too. As we made our way to the departure gates, I noticed a sign for Bali. I got excited, knowing this was our destination. But then I saw those men again, and they were staring at me, this time more intensely. I asked Alex if he knew them, but he just brushed it off and told me not to worry. That's when we got into an argument. I accused him of not telling me the truth, of bringing me somewhere dangerous. He insisted that everything was fine, but I could tell he was lying. We started yelling at each other, and then he grabbed my arm, and I screamed. That's when a security guard stepped in and separated us. I asked to be escorted out of the airport, and Alex didn't object. He looked guilty as we made our way back to the car. I didn't say much during the ride home, but I could tell he was upset too. When we got to my apartment, he apologised profusely and promised that he had only wanted to give me a nice trip. He said he didn't know who the men were, but that he had seen them before. He said he had thought that they were just random people, but he could see now that they were following us. I didn't know what to believe. I was angry and hurt, but also confused. Had he really just wanted to give me a nice trip? Or was there something more sinister going on? To this day, I still don't know. But I do know that I'm glad I got out of that situation before it was too late. I was just a regular high school student, dealing with the typical ups and downs of teenage life. I had recently broken up with my girlfriend, Emily, and was trying to move on. But one day, when I came home from school, I remember I heard a strange rustling sound coming from my closet. I went to investigate, assuming it was just a jacket that had fallen down or something. But when I opened the door, I was shocked to find Emily sitting there with a creepy smile on her face. She had actually brought snacks with her and had clearly planned to stay hidden in my closet for a while. I was completely caught off guard and had no idea what to do. I asked her why she was there and she just giggled and said she wanted to surprise me. It was clear that she had become obsessed with me and couldn't accept the fact that we had broken up. I tried to reason with her and convince her to just leave, but she refused. She just sat there in my closet, munching on chips and staring at me with a strange intensity. I didn't know what to do, so I decided to call the police. I didn't want to hurt her or get her in trouble, but I needed help to deal with this situation. When the police arrived, they found Emily still sitting in my closet, looking completely unfazed by the situation. They arrested her and took her away, and I thought that that would be the end of it. But it was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I started receiving strange messages from Emily. She would call me in the middle of the night and leave creepy voicemails or send me long, rambling emails professing her love for me. I tried to ignore her, but it was impossible to shake the feeling of being watched, of having someone constantly lurking in the shadows. Finally, I decided to confront her and tell her that she needed to leave me alone. But when I met her in person, I realised that she was more unhinged than I first thought. She started screaming at me and throwing things, and I knew I had to get out of there. I ran to my car and drove away as fast as I could, hoping that she wouldn't follow me. After that, I never heard from Emily again, but the experience left me shaken and scared. I couldn't believe that someone I had trusted and cared about could turn into such a dangerous stalker. It was a harsh lesson, but it taught me to be more careful about who I let into my life. I couldn't believe that someone I had once trusted and cared so much about could turn into such a dangerous stalker. I thought I had put my past with my ex-boyfriend behind me, but he was determined to prove me wrong. It had been years since we had seen each other, and I had moved on with my life. But one day, out of nowhere, he reached out to me and asked if he could invite me and my family over for dinner. At first, I was hesitant, but he did seem sincere, and I thought it might be a good way to catch up and put the past behind us once and for all. So I reluctantly agreed to let him host us. The night of the dinner, I arrived at his house with my family. He greeted us with a smile and showed us to the dining room, where he had prepared a beautiful meal. I could tell that he had put a lot of effort into it, and I was starting to think that maybe he had changed. But as the night went on, things started to take a darker turn. My ex-boyfriend became increasingly possessive and controlling, insisting on serving us each course himself and hovering over us as we ate. I could see the discomfort on my family's faces, and I knew that I had made a huge mistake in coming here. My ex-boyfriend suggested that we watch a movie together. I tried to politely decline, but he insisted, and I didn't want to cause a scene. So we all sat down to watch the movie, but my ex-boyfriend sat uncomfortably close to me on the couch, his arm around my shoulder. I tried to push him away, but he wouldn't budge. He just kept inching closer, his grip tightening, until I was practically suffocating. As soon as the movie ended, I stood up and told my family that it was time to leave. My ex-boyfriend protested, but I was firm, and I insisted that we had to go. He grabbed me by the arm and begged me to stay. "Please," he said, "I just want to be with you again." But I knew better. I knew that this was just another one of his attempts to control me, and I wasn't going to fall for it again. So I pulled away from him and left with my family, never looking back. It's been years since that night, and I've never seen or heard from him again. But the memory of that dinner still lingers, a reminder of the dark and twisted nature of his so-called love for me. I never actually thought that I'd ever be in this situation. I had broken up with my ex-boyfriend months ago, but he couldn't seem to let go. He would constantly send me texts and emails telling me how much he missed me and how he wanted us to get back together. At first, I tried to be polite and respond to his messages, but it quickly became too much. He would send me dozens of messages a day, and I couldn't keep up with it, so I decided to block him on all social media platforms and my phone. That's when things started to take a darker turn. He began threatening my friends, telling them that they needed to convince me to get back together with him. He would send them violent messages saying that he would hurt them if they didn't help him. I was terrified for my friend's safety, but I didn't know what to do. I couldn't reason with him, and he seemed to be getting worse by the day. One night, I received a call from one of my friends, saying that my ex-boyfriend had shown up at her house and was acting erratically. I rushed over to her house and found him pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. I tried to calm him down and get him to leave, but he suddenly snapped. He grabbed a nearby object and threw it at my friend, hitting her directly in the head. I was in absolute shock, and I couldn't believe what had just happened. We immediately called the police, and my ex-boyfriend was arrested. It turns out he had been struggling with a mental illness, and that he had never disclosed it to me. He was charged with assault and spent several months in a psychiatric facility. I was left feeling shaken and traumatized. I never thought that something like this could happen to me, and I realized that I needed to take my own safety more seriously. I began taking self-defense classes and installed a security system in my house. My ex-boyfriend eventually apologized for his actions, but the damage had already been done. I realized that I couldn't continue to have contact with him, and I had to let him go completely for my own well-being. It was a painful lesson, but one that I would never and will never forget. I was once in a very happy relationship with my girlfriend for 2 years, until one day she abruptly ended things with me. I was heartbroken and couldn't understand why she would leave me. Things always seemed so perfect, and it really did come out of the blue. But a few days after the breakup, I heard a disturbing rumour that my ex-girlfriend had started about me. She was telling everyone that I was a sex offender and had been on the sex offenders register. At first, I thought it was a joke. I had never been in any trouble with the law, let alone anything like that. But the rumour started to spread quickly, and soon enough, people were giving me strange looks and treating me differently. I knew I had to confront my ex-girlfriend about this, and so I arranged to meet up with her at a coffee shop. When we sat down, I asked her about the rumour, and she simply shrugged it off as a joke. But I knew it wasn't a joke, and I demanded to know why she would say something like that. That's when she revealed her true intentions. She wanted to get back together with me, and was using the rumour as leverage. She promised to clear my name if I agreed to take her back. I was so confused. I mean, she broke up with me, but at the same time, I was furious. I couldn't believe she would stoop so low just to get back with me. I secretly pulled out my phone and started recording the rest of the conversation. She continued to plead with me, telling me how much she loved me and that we were meant to be together. But I knew I couldn't trust her anymore. A few days before, I would have given anything to hear these words leave her mouth, but now, they were meaningless. After I left the coffee shop, I played the recording for a few of my closest friends. They were shocked and disgusted by what they heard. They immediately offered their support and told me that they knew I would never do something like that. I decided to take matters into my own hands and expose my ex-girlfriend's lies. I posted the recording on social media and explained the truth about the situation. Within hours, the rumour had been completely dispelled, and people started to apologise for believing it in the first place. My ex-girlfriend lost all of her friends, and her reputation was ruined. It took a while for me to get over what had happened. The hurt and betrayal from someone I once loved so deeply was hard to shake off. But in the end, I realised that I was better off without her. I had broken up with my ex-boyfriend over a year ago, but it seemed like he still couldn't let me go. I'd heard rumours that he was still obsessed with me, but I never took them seriously. until tonight. It was a dark evening, and I was sitting in my living room watching TV, when suddenly I heard a tap at my window. I looked over and saw him, my ex-boyfriend. He was watching me through the window with a desperate and awkward look on his face. I froze, unsure of what to do. I hadn't seen him in over a year, and the way he was looking at me made me feel so uneasy. He was never really good at socializing, and his lack of social skills had always been a source of tension between us. I was always embarrassed to bring him around my friends and family because of how awkward he was. But now, he was watching me through my window, and it was like all of that awkwardness had transformed into something menacing and angry. I tried to ignore him and went back to watching TV, hoping he would just go away. But he didn't. He just stood there, watching me, for what seemed like hours. It was like he was waiting for me to acknowledge him or invite him in, but I had absolutely no intention of doing that. As the night went on, I became increasingly paranoid. Every little noise outside made me jump, and every shadow seemed to be moving. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching me. Eventually, I convinced myself that it was all in my head, and I just went to bed. Surely he wasn't still there. But as I was lying there, trying to fall asleep, I heard a noise outside my window. It sounded like someone was trying to open it. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window, but when I got there, I didn't see anyone. I was about to turn away when suddenly I heard a voice behind me. "Hey," my ex-boyfriend said, his voice shaking. "Can we talk?" I spun around and saw him standing in my bedroom, his eyes filled with desperation and slight anger. I was terrified. "What are you doing in here?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible. "I just want to talk," he said, taking a step forward. I took a step back, my heart pounding. "You need to leave now." He didn't listen. He kept moving toward me, his eyes fixated on mine. I could see the anger and desperation in them, and it made my blood run cold. Suddenly, he lunged at me, and I stumbled backward, falling onto the bed. He pinned me down with his hands around my neck, and I struggled to breathe. "Please," I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "Please, let me go." But he didn't. He just squeezed harder, his anger turning into something dark and sinister. I don't remember much after that. The next thing I knew, the police were there, and my ex-boyfriend was being taken away in handcuffs. My parents must have heard the commotion and ran in and called them. I never saw him again after that, but the memory of that night still haunts me. It's been years since that happened, and I've moved on with my life, but every once in a while, I still see his face in my nightmares, or watching me through the window in that desperate and awkward way. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next video.